She is seeking re-election to the Senate for a second term. Senator Risa Hontiveros has become one of the most vocal opposition lawmakers in the upper chamber. Hontiveros is running under the banner of Akbayan and a guest candidate of Vice President Leni Robredo and Senator Kiko Pangilinan. Joining us now live on Up Close is Senator Hontiveros. Senator Risa, thank you so much for joining us on this program. The Philippines is one of the weakest, if not the weakest country in fighting COVID. How should this health crisis be managed differently?
Oh my gosh, 180 degrees differently, Rico. We've been saying from the first days, test, trace, isolate or quarantine and treat, plus now we are saying vaccinate. So kailangan kong sabihin, step up, no? The government's pandemic response, despite our country being the largest borrower of loans for COVID response, bakit tayo yung magiging pinakahuli sa region natin in terms of recovering our national health and as well the health of our economy? So it's a very painful situation we are in right now, Rico, and it's on the mind, top of mind of all Filipinos looking at a possible change next year. We have to focus on health kasi next year, 2022, will be year 3 of the pandemic. We have to focus on the economy kasi nga we will still be within a few years at least of slow and very painful and like I mentioned, laggard economic recovery. And I have to say, Rico, in this very hot season of Pharmaly and other long-standing corruption issues, I think top of mind of citizens will be corruption.
Right.
Checking it, fiscalizing it, and eventually eliminating it.
Definitely, Pharmaly will be front and center, no? When candidates talk about their platforms and how to resolve the corruption issue. What do you think is next for this investigation, Senator Risa? In a show of force, you have the Philippine College of Physicians along with several other medical societies expressing outrage over President Duterte's memorandum stopping executive officials from appearing in the Senate's ongoing investigation into the alleged corruption in his administration's pandemic response. Do you think the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee will really get to the bottom of it?
We intend to, Rico, at kami po ay nabubuhayan lalo ng loob, nagpapasalamat dun sa ating healthcare workers, health professionals for that stunning, unprecedented statement. I think everything has just piled up in the last 1.5 years. The sufferings on the health front, the sufferings on the economic front, again with a very poor economic pandemic response of our government, especially on behalf of poor families at yung ating mga MSMEs, na yung ating mga doktor at iba pang health professional ay hindi na talaga napigilang magsalita, lalo na idagdag yung issue ng korupsyon sa gitna pa ng pandemya. So moving forward in the Senate Blue Ribbon Committee, our chairman, Sen. Dick, has already begun to start drafting our committee report, but more and more angles to this sordid story keep emerging. Rico, more characters in this cast. I think we will have a very solid committee report, solid findings, and very strong recommendations of how to turn the tide in terms of our pandemic response, especially in the matters of our healthcare workers, in the matter of clean and not graft and corruption-laden expenditures of limited pandemic funds that should really be used to address the health and the economic crises facing our people.
A big issue right now, Senator Risa, is this provision of substitution in the Omnibus Election Code. And some of your Senate colleagues are saying candidate substitution by political parties has been abused. What should be done, in your opinion?
Well, I'm glad that Senate President, for one, has spoken up about that. We have only, but still, 8 months left in this 18th Congress. At alam naman natin, Rico, that our track record in the country in terms of electoral reform legislation could still certainly be added to. At isa na yan, yung posibleng pag-revisit, posibleng pag-amyenda ng probisyong iyan sa ating Omnibus Election Code. Siyempre, importante rin, Rico, to continue trying to build a real political party system here in the country, kasunod nung mga naunang electoral reforms tulad ng party list law, yung election automation, yung overseas absentee voting. I think we could also work on additional electoral reforms like campaign finance reform, and other proposed reforms to the political party system para talagang lalo na ngayong panahon ng pandemya at papasok na naman tayo sa isang general election year, that not only the parties, not only the candidates, but citizens as well, all voters will be more enabled to focus on the issues that matter going into year 2022. Na gaya ng binanggit ko nga kanina, palagay ko front and center talaga kalusugan, ekonomiya at korupsyon.
You have authored, Senator, a historic bill seeking to raise the age of sexual consent to 16-year-olds from the current 12 to protect children from sexual exploitation and abuse. Will this ever become law before your term ends?
Oh, I'm certainly hoping so, Rico. Pasado na siya on third and final reading in both the Senate and the House. In fact, we are beginning our bicameral conference committee meetings tomorrow. And like I mentioned earlier, may 8 buwan pa sa loob ng kongresong ito, sa loob ng administrasyong ito. This is a bill that I think no one can quarrel with. Ano po, yung itaas yung napakababa nating age of consent. Ngayon, 12 lang. It's the lowest in our region, Rico. One of the lowest in the world. At itaas natin, palakasin ang proteksyon sa ating mga anak, sa ating mga bata laban sa statutory rape in the interest of protecting the best interest of the child, fulfilling our obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children, while continuing to recognize the evolving capacities of young people. So, pwedeng pirmahan yan ni Presidente. At worst, he could let it lapse into law. Pero hindi ko ma-imagine any scenario na i-veto nila ito. This is what the Senate calls a happy bill. Kami po sa minority at yung mga kasama namin sa majority united to support the passage of this bill, and I believe it also had the widest support in the House.
You mentioned earlier the economy is one of the main issues in these elections. More than 4 million Filipinos, Senator Risa, or even more. I mean, those who are not included in the statistics have lost their jobs. A lot of micro, small enterprises have shut down, are out of business. The economy is still weak and faces a long road to recovery. If you become a senator for a second term, can you give us specific legislation or initiatives that you will put on the table to jumpstart the economy and create jobs for our kababayans?
I certainly can, Rico. On the heels of what we're trying to pass now as an even more health and economic responsive national budget for year 2022, kung may kahit anong pag-asa pa para sa isang Bayanihan 3. On the heels of that, kapag makapagtrabaho ulit ako sa Senado sa susunod, I will continue to work on bills like for Filipinos in the informal economy, maternity benefits for pregnant workers in the informal sector, benefits for our workers in the gig economy. Buhay na po ito, Rico, before the pandemic, and even more so with the lockdowns, with everybody working and studying online. Our delivery riders, even if they wish, the majority of them wish to preserve their status not as employees but as freelancers, holding their own time, making their own decisions about which jobs they will take, still benefits for them as working people under the law. For our overseas Filipino workers, Rico, especially as the global economy is only beginning to really get back on its feet in a still not completely designed new and better economic normal, one of the bills I'd like to continue working on, unless we can happily pass it in this 18th Congress, the Magna Carta of Seafarers for our mga marino, among many other economic measures, Rico, that I believe the next Congress can continue to work on in terms of our legacy in this 18th Congress. And what I hope the next administration will do much better than the current administration in terms of protecting Filipino families, lalo na yung mga mahihirap na pamilya, in terms of protecting yung ating mga micro, small, and medium enterprises from the worst effects of this pandemic and recession.
And Senator Risa, and make sure that with this billions of pesos in funding, there is transparency and accountability, and that the funds are accounted for and it goes to the proper sectors and used in the right way.
Exactly. That is what rankles, Rico, about the issues we are investigating and how to unearth the truth about following the COA audit report of the Department of Health's expenditures last year, 2020, kung bakit may 42 billion pesos transferred by DOH to the PSDBM without proper documentation, and how apparently that 42B has been dipped into to favor this small, new, undercapitalized company to the detriment, Rico, sa mga Pilipinong kumpanya na nag-repurpose to meet Filipinos' pandemic needs. Yung mga manggagawa nila na handang-handang gawin ang kanilang tungkulin sa ating bayan. And apparently, with a generous dose of influence peddling by the former presidential economic advisor Michael Yang, and therefore even the president's own role in this whole fiasco is still not completely accounted for. So definitely, with on the heels of our disappointment about how the administration has misused the funds appropriated by Congress as requested by the executive in Bayanihan 1, Bayanihan 2, the General Appropriations Acts or national budgets. Well, moving forward, Rico, in year 2022, we have to do much, much better on behalf of our suffering people. Kasi hindi talaga katanggap-tanggap na yung mga pondong galing sa buwis ng mamamayan, maayos na inappropriate ng ating Kongreso, hiningi ng executive, ay hindi gamitin optimally, maximally to help our people recover our physical health, to help our economy recover its health, and again generate more jobs, again get more enterprises and businesses back on their feet, and set us back on the road that we were more than half a decade ago, and especially a year and a half ago, towards being one of the more developed economies in Asia, towards middle income status on the global stage.
And we will continue our discussion with Senator Risa Hontiveros after this short break on The Final Word. Also, glad you're staying with us on The Final Word on CNN Philippines. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rico Hizon, and we continue our discussion now up close with Senator Risa Hontiveros. Senator Risa, we have 2 minutes left in our interview, and I would like you to answer these 6 questions with just a yes or a no. All right?
Okay.
First question.
All right.
Do you favor easier public access to the statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth of the President, Vice President, and members of Congress?
Yes.
Do you support lifting foreign ownership limits in the Constitution?
No.
Do you favor the reimposition of the death penalty for drug-related crimes?
No.
Should a sitting president be allowed to run for vice president in the next election?
No.
Do you favor resuming peace talks with the communist rebels?
Yes.
And should the country be more aggressive in protecting its maritime interests in the West Philippine Sea?
Oh, yes.
Your final word, Senator Risa Hontiveros, to the Filipino people.
Salamat, Rico. Sa mga kababayan namin at mga kapwa-botante, sana po moving forward beyond the sufferings of this pandemic so far, sa ating kalusugan, sa kamatayan na dumalaw sa sobrang daming pamilyang Pilipino, sa kawalan ng trabaho at hanap buhay, sa gutom na pinagdudusahan ng ating mga kababayan. Sana po moving forward, regardless of who we voted for in 2016, lahat po tayo nagdurusa. Sana po moving forward into 2022, mabawi natin ulit yung dati nating mas malawak na pagkakaisa. Pagtulong-tulungan po nating gumaling sa COVID-19 pandemic na ito. Pagtulong-tulungan po nating guminhawa muli. Bawasan talaga ng mahigit ang kahirapan na lalong dumami dito sa ating lipunan. At pagkaisahin natin yung insistence natin sa malinis na paggogobyerno at malinis na paggastos ng ating gobyerno sa perang galing sa ating pagod at galing sa ating buwis. Palagay ko po ay muli, regardless of sino ang mga binoto natin noong 2016, kaya pa nating magbuo ng mas malawak na pagkakaisa para sa ganyang mga pangarap. Isang new and better normal para sa ating lipunan sa 2022. Pagtulungan po natin iyon.
Senator Risa Hontiveros, thank you so much for joining us on Up Close on The Final Word.